What kind of fool tries to raid a veteran's land with fake authority and a clipboard? They thought they were knocking on a rancher's door. They didn't know they were stepping into a battlefield built by someone who's never lost. Keep watching. Because the man they underestimated hasn't even stood up yet. They showed up at 7:03 a.m. 3 SUVs, tinted windows, unmarked, rolling through the dust like they owned the road. One by one, they parked in a V formation at the edge of the gravel drive, engines still humming as 5 men stepped out, all wearing matching navy jackets with HOA compliance officer printed in bold white font across the back. But the font was cheap. The patches are crooked. Their boots are too clean. Their posture was too forced. From inside the barn, Cal Dawson set down his coffee, wiped his hands on a faded red towel, and stepped out into the morning light. He didn't rush. Didn't ask questions. Just stood on the porch, one hand resting loosely against the railing, eyes like steel beneath the brim of his weathered hat. The lead man, tall, sharp-bearded, wearing aviators, walked up with a clipboard and a smug grin. "Mr. Dawson," he said, "we're here on behalf of the Community Housing Association to issue a formal notice of violation. Your structures are non-compliant. Your fencing exceeds approved height, and we've had multiple complaints about unauthorized livestock." Cal didn't move. "There's no HOA out here," he said flatly. The man laughed, glancing back at his crew. "There is now." Behind him, 2 men moved toward the barn. One circled near the solar array. Another pulled out his phone and began filming the property like he was building a case for court. "We're going to need to inspect the interior structures," the lead man continued. "Refusal will result in a citation and possible asset seizure." Cal tilted his head slightly. "You bring a warrant." "We don't need one," the man replied. "This falls under compliance enforcement. Private HOA charter gives us authority within district bounds." Cal nodded slowly, eyes scanning each of them, counting movements, body language, trigger fingers. "District boundaries changed. As of this morning," the man said, smirking. "You're in it." One of the others laughed. "Should have read your mail, cowboy." Cal's voice didn't rise. It never did. "You're on private land." The lead man took a step up onto the porch, closer than he should have. "So are we." A beat passed. Wind cut across the fields, rattling dry fence wire and the old U.S. Navy flag hanging from the pole beside the porch. The man looked at it, sneered. "Cute. You trying to intimidate us?" Cal blinked once. Not yet, and the porch creaked under his weight as he took a single, deliberate step forward. The man on the porch smirked like he'd won something, like stepping over another man's threshold made him king of it. "We're going to need to see inside that barn, Mr. Dawson," he said, tapping the clipboard for show. "Let's make this easy." "Yeah." Cal didn't move. He watched the other 2 circling his equipment. One snapping photos of his solar panels, the other kneeling by the water filtration tanks with a flashlight like he was inspecting contraband. "I built all that," Cal said calmly. "It's legal. Registered. The code was checked by the county 5 years ago." "County doesn't matter," the man snapped. "This is HOA jurisdiction now." One of the other men laughed. "It's really nice, though. Too nice to be off-grid." The one filming called out. "Looks like tax evasion land to me." Cal's eyes narrowed just slightly, but his boots stayed planted. "You boys always harass veterans this early in the day." The lead man took another step, now just 2 feet away. "You got something to hide." Old man behind them. The man by the barn started testing the door handle. Locked. Probably full of weed or ammo. "Careful," Cal said. "Not a threat. Just a statement, like gravity." The man on the porch barked. "We're authorized to inspect any building visible from the street. That includes sheds, barns, and garages. Cal stared at him. This ain't a street. It's a mile-long gravel trail that ends at a gate you trespassed to get through. The clipboard man leaned in. You think just 'cause you live out here, the rules don't apply. You're gonna learn real fast who's in charge now. The one by the barn gave the door a kick. We could just force entry, claim obstruction. Cal turned his head slightly, voice low. That'd be your first real mistake today. The man filming laughed. You gonna call your lawyer or your goat herd? Cal looked at the flagpole again. The Navy flag fluttered in the wind, faded by sun and time, but still standing. No, he said. I don't call people. They call me. The man at the barn pulled a crowbar from his bag. Cal's hand twitched. Just once, near his belt, but still. He didn't move. Not yet. The man at the barn wedged the crowbar under the latch, grunting as he tested leverage, while another stomped near the goat pen, kicking at a feeding trough like it insulted him. This place is a joke, he called out. Looks like a bunker crossed with a hippie farm. Cal said nothing. He was still, stone still, until the tall one on the porch, still too close, tilted his head and looked up. Eyes locking on the flagpole just 5 feet from him. That's your Navy flag, he sneered. Cute. Then, without asking, without permission, he reached up and touched it, running 2 fingers along the bottom seam like it was a piece of cloth, not a symbol. Cal's eyes shifted, his jaw set, and time, for everyone involved, fractured. That's your second mistake, Cal said quietly. The man laughed. Or what? You gonna write me up? Cal moved, fast, not frantic. Precise. 1 step forward, one hand grabbing the man's wrist mid-air, twisting it just enough to force a stumble, just enough to drop the clipboard. The man barely had time to shout before his knees hit the porch. Cal didn't punch. He didn't choke. He just leaned down, voice level with a whisper. Never touch the colors unless you've bled for them. The porch went dead silent. Every fake officer froze mid-step. Even the crowbar man stopped moving. Cal stood again, letting the man crumple fully to the boards. That flag flew in Kandahar. And before that, Fallujah. It was folded over a friend of mine who didn't come home. So, when you touch it like that. He glanced at the others. I stopped being polite. The man on the ground groaned, still holding his wrist. You're insane. No, Cal said. I'm trained. Then he looked at the others, eyes steady. Now you're in my house. My rules. You better pray. The next move you make is the smart one. But it wasn't. The man on the porch tried to stand, but his legs betrayed him. He staggered, cursing, gripping his wrist as if it had been shattered. But Cal had barely touched him. That's what scared them most. Across the yard, the guy by the barn dropped the crowbar and took 2 cautious steps back, eyes flicking toward his SUV like he was calculating escape. What the hell was that? One of them whispered. He didn't even move fast. Cal stepped off the porch, 1 boot to the dirt, then another. His shadow stretched wide in the rising sun, and for the first time since their arrival, no one spoke. He walked calmly past the man clutching his wrist, past the one still holding the phone mid-recording. You're all very brave, Cal said, his voice like gravel over broken glass. 5 men, fake badges, no paperwork, all muscle and no mission. He turned his head slowly toward the guy filming. Still think this is content? The man flinched, dropped the phone, and bent to grab it. But Cal's boot came down first, pinning it into the dust. Too late, he said. You already published your mistake. Another man reached for something inside his coat. Cal was there before the hand reached the zipper. 1 arm twist, 1 pivot, and the man was face first against the side of the SUV. his wind knocked out, eyes wide with panic. Cal didn't yell. He didn't sweat. He just breathed like he'd done this in another country with less sunlight. "Who the hell are you?" One of them gasped. Cal looked at him, expression unreadable. "The reason this place is quiet." He stepped back, let the man drop, and walked toward the barn. "You thought you were raiding a ranch," he said without turning. "You walked into a warfighter's home. You showed up with arrogance. I woke up with discipline." He picked up the crowbar from the ground, turned it in his hands, and set it gently on the workbench, like a father setting down a child's toy. "Now get off my property, before the part of me that doesn't ask questions comes out." No one moved. No one answered. Because for the first time, they weren't pretending to be officers. They were remembering they were just men, and they'd picked the wrong front porch. The dust hadn't even settled around the SUVs when another vehicle pulled up. Matte black, no tags, no county seal, no lights, just presence. It stopped 20 yards out, silent. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out in jeans, boots, and a tan tactical jacket. No insignia, but every line of his body said, military. He carried nothing visible but walked like he never needed to. Cal looked up. Just a nod. The man nodded back. No words. The fake HOA enforcers stiffened. One of them whispered, "Who's that?" Another said, "You call backup." Cal didn't look at them. "He's not backup," he said. "He's a friend." The man approached, calm and quiet, like he'd just stepped out of a Blackhawk and hadn't realized the war was already over. He tossed Cal a compact black radio. "You'll want to listen in. They're not just amateurs. Someone's paying them." Cal caught the device with one hand, turned the dial, and a stream of encrypted chatter crackled through. A woman's voice, saying, "Target holding position. Local law. Delayed. Proceed with phase 2. Cal's jaw didn't tighten. His eyes didn't blink. He just turned the radio off and said, "So it's a land grab, using fake enforcement to scare out veterans with private acreage." The other man nodded. Mostly quiet ones. Isolated. No cameras. Except you. Cal looked at the hidden lens tucked under the porch roof, already streaming to 3 encrypted cloud drives. "Yeah, except me." One of the fake cops tried to retreat, stepping slowly toward his SUV. "Hey, listen. We were just following orders," Cal cut in, walking past him without looking. That line only works in tribunals. Not here. The others were backing up now, weapons holstered but useless, instincts screaming at them that something was wrong. Not just the way they were losing control, but the way Cal had never wanted it in the first place. "You think I'm a rancher?" Cal said, voice soft but sharp. "I retired from the Navy." "Sure, but not just SEAL teams." He stopped, turned. Let them look into his eyes. Tier 1, 0 dark work, off books, no names, no ranks. The kind of ops they bury under 10 layers of redacted pages. He walked slowly now, like a shadow stretching in the sun. The kind of soldier they call when the ones with medals start dying. And suddenly, the men who thought they came to intimidate couldn't even stand straight. Cal walked to the barn and tapped 3 times on the metal latch. Sharp, deliberate, coded. Inside, a drone hummed to life and rose silently into the sky through a disguised hatch in the roof, eyes now overhead. The man beside him. Call sign, Reaper. Slid a tablet from his jacket and synced the feed. "We've got eyes. 5 heat signatures are still in place. 1 more hiding in SUV 3. Cal nodded once. "Send it live." Reaper hit a switch. The footage went straight to a private server, and from there to 3 media outlets that trusted Cal's name more than their own editorial board. On screen 5, fake officers with no legal authority. attempting to raid a veteran's land with counterfeit credentials and illegal surveillance. The internet would eat it alive. But this wasn't about viral videos. It was about extraction, exposure, and consequences. The man near the SUV panicked first. He saw the drone, dropped his radio, took off running across the open field. Cal didn't follow. He didn't have to. One whistle. Low, precise. And from behind the tree line, a silent drone-mounted spotlight locked on the runner, tracking him like prey. Reaper muttered, "You want me to tag him?" Cal shook his head. "Let the sun do it." Meanwhile, another fake officer tried to pull open one of Cal's comms boxes, thinking it might cut the signal. It didn't. It triggered the secondary protocol. Doors locking, network rerouting, and a siren in town that only a few people would recognize. At the sheriff's station, a red light blinked for the first time in 8 years. The deputy read the code and said one word: Dawson. 5 minutes later, real cruisers were en route. Back at the ranch, Cal faced the last 3. "Still think this is a code violation." One of them tried to look tough. "We didn't know who you were." "You still don't," Reaper muttered. "But you're about to find out who owns the land you were standing on." Cal stepped forward again. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to lay down every fake badge, radio, and clipboard. You're going to sit on the gravel, hands on your heads, and when the real law arrives, you're going to pray they get here before your employers do." One of them hesitated, or what Cal stared straight through him, or I stopped being nice. And the gravel crunched as every one of them dropped what they were holding. The sirens started soft, just a whisper on the wind. But within seconds, they crescendoed into a full tactical arrival. 4 sheriff's cruisers and 2 unmarked black Suburbans pulling up in formation. Tires crunching gravel with purpose. Deputies poured out, armed but not aggressive, scanning the scene until one of them, broad-shouldered, weathered, eyes sharp behind mirrored shades, spotted Cal standing in front of the barn, arms folded, unflinching. The deputy pulled off his sunglasses, blinked, then nodded once, almost to himself. "It's him." The others paused. "You sure?" The man stepped forward, lowered his voice. "That's Dawson." A hush fell over the entire scene. Then the sheriff himself arrived. Tall, calm, mustache thick with authority. He stepped out slowly, scanning the 5 fake officers on the ground with their hands on their heads, then turned to Cal. No guns. No accusations. Just a moment of silence between men who'd been to hell in different uniforms. The sheriff raised his hand and saluted. "Lieutenant Commander," he said. "Didn't expect to see you stateside again." Cal gave a small nod. "Didn't expect to be needed." Behind him, one of the fake HOA enforcers looked up, confused. "Wait, what is this?" One of the deputies turned, disgust in his voice. "You idiots tried to raid his land." Another officer kicked over one of the fake badges. "These aren't real. Paper laminate. No registry. No authority. Copy that," said a voice from the Suburban. Then the doors opened, and 2 federal agents stepped out. Real ones, with windbreakers, clipped tones, and 0 tolerance. "We've been tracking a private security ring running intimidation ops under false HOA fronts. Until now, they've been ghosts." One of them looked at Cal. "You just made them visible." Cal didn't respond. He didn't need to. One by one, the fake officers were zip-tied and led toward the cruisers. The one who mocked the flag protested. "We didn't know who he was." The sheriff turned and said, "That's the problem. If you had, you'd have run." Then, he looked back at Cal. "You want to press charges?" Cal looked at his land, his barn, the flag still fluttering in the breeze. Then he said, "No, I want the world to see what happens when the wrong men pretend to have power. and walk onto the porch of someone who doesn't. The sheriff smiled. That'll do just fine. And with that, the real show was over. But the story was just beginning. The video went live at 10:07 a.m. By noon, it had 5 million views. By evening, it was on every news network from Lubbock to London. Footage of 5 armed men pretending to be law, getting neutralized by a former Navy SEAL without a single shot fired. It wasn't just rare, it was righteous. Hashtags bloomed like wildfire. The ranch standoff. Dawson did what? Real quiet power. News anchors dissected it. Veterans saluted it. And civilians shared it like gospel. But Cal, he didn't watch a second of it. He was fixing a fence post when the first reporter showed up. Boots too clean, smile too wide. Cal didn't look up. Private land. He said, no cameras. Word got out fast, not just about the raid, but about the man, the one who didn't want attention, the one who didn't want thanks, but got both anyway. Neighbors started driving out, not for interviews, but to shake his hand, to leave pies, firewood, folded letters from their sons who said, now I want to join. Kids left drawings of goats and flags in his mailbox. One boy even brought his own goat and asked if it could stay. Cal let it. The goat was feisty, loud, and had no sense of boundaries. The town named it Commander. Reaper laughed for the first time in a decade. Fitting. One morning, the sheriff pulled up again, not with questions, but with a folded American flag in a case and a handwritten note. You reminded this town who we are. Cal didn't reply, just took the case, nodded once, and went back to feeding the animals. The fence stood taller now, not because it needed to, but because people finally saw what was behind it. The days after the storm were slow, not empty, just quiet in a new way, like the land itself had exhaled. Cal walked the perimeter fence every morning, boots sinking into earth he'd protected, without ever needing to load a rifle. The goats wandered farther now, sensing calm. Commander, the loudest one, followed him like a shadow, head tilted like it understood legacy. He repaired things, small things, a hinge on the barn door, a cracked trough, the broken latch on the porch gate, not because he had to, but because he could. And that was a kind of peace no one could fake. Kids from the nearby school started showing up on Saturdays. No field trip, just showing up to see where the Navy man lives. Cal didn't speak much, but when one boy asked, how do you know when it's right to stand your ground? Cal looked out across the pasture, then back to the child, and said, when backing down would make you forget who you are. That boy nodded. Then came back every week. One afternoon, the sheriff stopped by. No cruiser, no lights. Just him, a thermos, and a folded flag in a box. He handed it to Cal and said, for what you did out here, and what you didn't do. Cal accepted it. No words, just the weight of respect. And as the sun dropped behind the hills, lighting the field gold, Jaden, the boy who came every week, practiced roping with an old line Cal had hung on the fence. He missed every time, but never gave up. Cal watched from the porch, not smiling, just still, like he knew. Something had taken root here, and it was going to grow. They came with fake badges, printed threats, and the belief that intimidation could replace authority. They expected a man living alone with goats, solar panels, and silence would fold like paper. But instead, they found a warfighter who didn't need to raise his voice to end a battle. The media called it the ranch standoff. The internet called it justice. But Cal never gave it a name. He just went back to feeding the animals, fixing the gate, and handing out rope to kids who wanted to learn how to hold on to something. the camera fades. Not to black, but to morning light over his fields. And then, one line appears on screen, written in white against the dawn. I don't fight for land. I fight for the right to stand on it. Free, unafraid, and uninvited. They came to dominate. They left exposed. The law didn't save this land. Discipline did. Silence did. A life of training that no camera ever filmed. And now, across this country, one more boy is learning to stand taller, speak softer, and fight only when it matters. Because sometimes the quietest man in town is the one who taught louder men how to survive, and he never asked to be saluted. Just not to be provoked.